Meeting is being recorded.
Okay. Just by way of introduction, my name is Rob Levine. I'm a sales consultant here on the team with Tableau based out of Denver, Colorado. With me and presenting today is one of our other sales consultants on the team, Malenko Georgic, and we'll be taking you through the session today. Just some quick logistics. I believe everyone is muted, and if you have any questions, please post them to the Q&A panel, not the chat window. We'll be moderating that throughout the session today, and we should have plenty of time after to open it up for Q&A, but we'll hold questions until the end. As you're probably aware, this is obviously the final webinar for the Tableau Tuesday series of the year, seeing that it's December. We've covered quite a lot. We've done topics such as product enhancements with the product updates twice a year. We've done different components of the platform, Tableau Server, new add-on capabilities like Ask Data and Tableau Prep, as well as different use cases and different ways of utilizing Tableau in terms of embedded analytics, mobilizing, and so forth. And of course, today is always a fun topic. It's actually product tips and tricks. And just to let you know, I've actually been at Tableau for over 6 years. I use the product every day. And anytime that I've seen a Tableau tips and tricks session, even I pick something up. Usually 3 or 4 things that even after all this time, I just never knew were there in the product or capable within the product. And so this is always one of the more fun topics to present too. And if you were to Google Tableau tips and tricks, you'd really end up with a laundry list of videos, blogs, how-to articles, example workbooks. Here are just a few of the many that I've highlighted for reference, and we'll show you how to get access to these as well. Some of these are from TC sessions. Some of them are from just the past year or so, but some are a little bit older, but still very much relevant. But I think the key thing to keep in mind is that a lot of these presentations are run by folks who've never worked at Tableau. And that just speaks to the strength of the Tableau community, that the wealth of knowledge that's out there and that is available to us all is so vast, and it makes learning the product that much easier and certainly more enjoyable too. So without further ado, Malenko and I will show you some of our favorite little things that make using Tableau easy and fun, and hopefully teach you a thing or two that will save you some time and effort every so often. So my first trick is, or tip I should say, is right mouse drag. So normally when you were to drag something out into the view, you obviously click your left mouse button and drag it out there. And I see that in this case for customer name, it's going to give me an individual row for each one of them, and we end up with 793 marks. Now, instead of using my left mouse button to do the drag, I'm going to use my right mouse button. The difference is this is actually going to give me a pop-up, and it's essentially a shortcut to various types of aggregations around that field. So in this case, I'm just going to do account distinct, and now I've got a measure of my customer names. And as you see, it matches at 793, which means that I can also use that measure in the form of a report. So that right mouse button drag is basically just a way to shortcut to kind of different properties around the field that you're dragging. And that can come in the form, or that can be applicable to both dimensions and measures. So if I were to just drag out sales using my left, it defaults to the aggregation of sum, because that's the default aggregation. If I use my right mouse button to drag, I get that pop-up menu and I can quickly set it to average sales, for example. So just a neat little thing that can certainly save you some time. Feel free to use that on your own on any field that's in the data set. Another one that I've kind of been using more recently is the keyboard shortcuts. A lot of times what I've seen, certainly with folks who are new to Tableau, as they get into Show Me, sometimes it seems to have disappeared on them. And let me see if I can, I actually got to go into my system settings for this one, so bear with me. Just escape out of this. And let me go back into my workbook. Bear with me. I've got another another hotkey that is that should be taking on the same impact with Show Me. But if I hit Control 1, it'll expand or collapse the Show Me. So it's just an easy way to do that. But the keyboard shortcuts that I've been using most often are I'm going to hold the Control button down on my keyboard, and I'm going to use my left arrow, or excuse me, my right arrow to make the cells bigger, and my left arrow to make them smaller. The columns, I should say. And certainly I can do the same with Control up or down to make the rows bigger or smaller. So rather than having to go in and just literally hover over to resize exactly where you want, the keyboard is just a quick way to do that. And if you do Control B, that actually makes that controls each individual cell with the same aspect ratio. And Control Shift B to expand it back. Now there are certainly a lot of keyboard shortcuts out there. If you just Google Tableau keyboard shortcuts, this out of the way, you'll see that we've actually got a link in the documentation that walks through them all and describes what they are. But there are plenty other links that are out there around people's favorites. Here's one that I thought that was pretty helpful, about 40 great Tableau keyboard shortcuts. You can feel free to look through these at your leisure, but I think it's always helpful just to know some of those. All right, so let's move on to the next one, which is the highlighter. So as you see here, obviously we have a scatter plot of sales and profit by individual customer name, and I can mouse over and easily see the customer name that's identified for each bubble. But the challenge is, let's say I'm looking for someone specific, especially as it gets into kind of the mass here. I'm looking for someone with a similar name to me, Rob, right? It's a lot of hunting and pecking, and I'm probably not going to be successful. So every field that's on the view, you can actually come in and say Show Highlighter. And now that's essentially a Google search for your viz, right? So I can start to type in Rob, and you see that anything that matches that is everything gets grayed out except for what matches the criteria that I've put in. And what's also nice is that I hover over, you see how it actually changes and it's dynamic, and it shows me exactly where they are. So that's one way to use the highlighter. And then another way would be in the tooltip itself, right? So if I were to click on Tamara, and then I can actually click into the tooltip, and when I click on the name customer name Tamara, you see that the other marks that represent Tamara are also showing up. In the same way, I can also click on Central, and you see that it's actually showing up or highlighting just the Central. So your tooltip is not just a tooltip of information, it's also kind of an interactive way to highlight. So this is certainly a lot easier than filtering, fewer clicks, so it's just a lot easier to work within. Next on the list, we've actually got different kinds of formatting that you can do for your viz. So right now we're looking at monthly sales for the last 4 years, it looks like, maybe even almost 5. And if I were to click on this axis and say Format, and let's go into the pane, and let's go to our dates. And obviously I can come in and just select what's out of the box there. For some reason that's not affecting. Let me try it this way. Let me rebuild this. Quarter. Let me change this to month. There we go. So now if I click on the dates, try this, do MMM. Oh, that doesn't seem to be taking the way I was planning it to. Bear with me, I'm just going to rebuild a quick view. And let's just look at our sales over time and change this to month. It's very possible I might have had a formatting thing going on. Let's format it here by going into the pill itself. And let's oh, on the axis, that's why. I was incorrect. I actually had it in the right spot to begin. Anyway, you can change the format just by the default options there. But let's say you want a specific format, you can just come into your custom and start to type M, and then you notice that literally keystroke for keystroke, it's actually updating the axis appropriately. And as I type in MMM, you see that it's doing the three-letter abbreviation. If I type in a fourth, it starts to do the full name. Fifth, it does just the first letter. And of course, I can always add in the year. So you have a lot of options. And again, the nice thing is that there's no apply button. You literally just type it in keystroke for keystroke. It's going to update automatically. So certainly nice features there that allow you to do that. All right. So let's go back to our next one. And in this case, what we have here, you notice that I've got a red line that goes along the zero, the zero line of our viz. And certainly as we're looking at profit in descending order, there's kind of some in the middle here that kind of straddle that line. And so that red line is kind of a way to easily see where something falls either above or below it. And the way to do that, you would just come in here and let's go to our format menu. And obviously there are a lot of options in here with fonts, alignment, shading, borders, and lines. When I come into just the lines, you'll see that I've just changed the settings on my zero line to be thinner, thicker. I actually had it set up as the most, and then of course I colored by the color red. So that's a very easy thing to do. And then I also got rid of our grid lines, which I can put right back in. You kind of see them in the background there. Now, a subsequent tip from that is you can start to tell that there are a lot of formatting options, and you can certainly get lost in here. And if I were to format something like in this viz without me telling you ahead of time what I've done, you might not know where those changes have been made. Well, a good thing to keep in mind is that anything that you see highlighted as bold means that it's been changed from the default. So that's kind of your indicator of what's been changed and what hasn't. And the other thing is that if you were to simply right click on it and say clear, it'll go back to the default. So that's one of those things, if you want to not drive yourself crazy with regard to the formatting, that bold is going to be kind of your cliff notes of what's been changed and what hasn't. All right, next, and then I'll turn it over to Malenko. You notice here that we've just got a map view of, this is basically just, I think this is profit and sales by different cities. And as you see in certain highly populated areas like the Bay Area, Southern California, and then New York, we have larger bubbles that are kind of blocking other bubbles underneath it, right? So another good example of this is when I select or highlight Arizona, you see there's about maybe a dozen or so that are kind of stuck behind the larger bubble of Phoenix. So a good way to address that is, and I never knew this, you could actually sort on a map. So let's go into our sort order for zip code, and that will bring up the sort menu. And all I'm doing is right now I'm sorting it by sales in a descending order. If I change that to ascending, you'll see that obviously those bubbles now show up. So just like you can sort on a traditional view, you can sort on a map as well. And with that, let me go ahead and turn it over to Malenko. He's got a few, and then we'll switch back for a few before wrapping up. So Malenko, let me make you the presenter. All right, you should be good to go.
Thank you, Rob. Do you see my screen?
We do, yeah, thanks.
Okay. If you can enable the Q&A chat, I couldn't answer any of the questions. So maybe you can just look at the chat and answer a few questions that are there.
Yep, I'll take care of it.
Okay, perfect. You screen, right?
Correct.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. So for my first tip and tricks, we're going to talk about the calculations. So currently, or creating calculated fields. So currently, you know that there are quite a few options in Tableau how to create a calculated field. You go here, click on the white space, and then do create calculated field. Or you can go into the drop-down menu and then select calculated field. There's also a couple of other options. You can go under the analysis and so on. But if you really wanted to do a quick calculation, so for example, in this particular view, we have sales and profit, and if we wanted to do just the difference between the two to find the actual value of the cost, we could do the what we call the inline calculation. So how do we do that? So it's as simple as just double clicking on the column, or you can double click on the row, it doesn't really matter. And you can just start typing here. So in this particular case, we're looking at sum of sales, and then just subtract sum of profit. Um, and, um, and there you go. And we just created a new calculation, which is called the inline calculation. So now you can notice that this calculation is not included in the measures, but simply by just dragging it and dropping it into the measures, we just created or added this new calculated field. And now we have option of just renaming it, call it like cost, and so on. So that's a very quick and easy way of how to do simple inline calculations. So for trick number 2, I don't know if any or many of you are familiar with this, but let's say that if we wanted to color this view by region. Now, if you just grab it from here, from the rows, and drop it onto the colors. In fact, what I did, I removed the regions and just put it on the color. But what if I wanted to keep the region in the rows? Now, the option that I have is to go through my list of dimensions and find wherever the region is, and then drag it from the dimensions onto the color. But another option is to do control drag. So now if you have a Mac, it would be a command. On the PC, it would be control. So what I do is I control click on the region and I just grab it and drop it onto the color. Now I preserve the region in the rows, but I dropped it onto my marks bill onto the color. Now, when you do the drag, I just want to mention this, or a little tip here. When you do the drag, you actually have to hold down the control key or the command key. Now, see if I release the key, but I still am holding down my mouse. I'm losing that plus button. So now if I release the control key, I will in fact remove the region from the rows. So so you have to hold down the control key until you release the mouse. So that's tip number 2. And also, if you notice here in the title, we have the field that says the data is current as of the date. So that was the date when we refreshed the data. So how do we include this field? Well, it's actually quite simple. If I just open the title, under the insert, there is a field called data update time. So that means whenever we update the data, this field will be refreshed. So if I just select this field now, I just included this the timestamp when the data was updated. Okay, so that's tip number 3. Now moving on, we have a very simple bar chart here, but what if we wanted to create a lollipop chart? So I'll just take you through the steps, and so what do? We just need a replica of the sum of sales. So that's where our control drag is coming into place. So I'm just going to control drag it and duplicate it. So now we have these 2 charts. So how do we create a lollipop? Well, we need to convert the bottom one to a circle. So now if I just go under the marks card and change this to circle, and then go into the drop down and create dual axis. But see what happened here. Automatically Tableau chose to use bubbles for both charts. And so now how do we change this back, or how do we change this to the lollipop? So now we have to go to the top chart, change this to a bar, and then change the size back to make it small so that it looks like a lollipop. Now, what we want to do is we want to override the automatic selection of the visualization. So how do we do that? So it's actually quite simple. So let's just go back to our initial so let's go to the beginning. So see how in the marks card for the visualizations for the chart types, we have the automatic. Well, we need to switch this to a bar. So now if we switch this to a bar, now when we start building our visualizations, once we change the shape and do the dual axis, the shapes will be preserved. So the shape of the bar is preserved. And now we can very easily change this to look like a lollipop. So just to recap, when we at the beginning just change the marks the shape from automatic to bar, and then you will not have to switch it again. Okay, so tip number 5. Now, in this particular visualization, we have a very simple visualization category by segment. Now, if we wanted to color this visualization by segment, so we just drag it, put it onto the color. Now, what if we, sorry, I meant color by category. So what if we wanted to color it by segment? So this is something that I just recently learned about this. Now, usually if we just take the segment and drop it onto the color, we in fact replace the category. But what I would like to do, I would like to have both colors. So I want to color by category and then color by segment. So how do we do that? It's actually quite simple. So the first thing that we do is we just drag onto the category onto the color, but then we take segment and then we put it onto details. And the only thing we need to do now is go into this drop-down menu here and change it to color. So now what we did is we colored the category, and so in this particular case is by green, and then we're shading it by segment. So very easy way of having multiple or two colors on your visualization. Okay, moving on, separate legends. Now, if we have a crosstab like this, automatically you just get one legend. So in this case, we're profit ratio, quantity, sales by the same color, which goes from orange to blue. But what if we wanted to have multiple colors based on different measures? The only thing we really need to do is just do right click on the measures value and just say use separate legends. So now we have a control over all the measures, and we can change the colors however we want. Right, so it's very simple. You're all familiar with this. Okay, moving on. Labels in bars. So now, what if we wanted to display the sum of sales on the bar itself? So currently, how do we do? I mean, everybody's familiar with just dragging the sales and dropping it onto the labels. And now we have the color, or not the color, the font, or the value of the sums, which is displayed uh, outside of the bars. Now, if we wanted to change this and put it inside of the bar, we can go in the labels property and the alignment, we can start playing with this. But you see, there's no real option to put this value just inside of the bar, but push it all the way to the right. So how do we do that? Well, we need to create a combination chart. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to duplicate the sums, and I'm going to change this visualization here from bar to Gantt. And now I can play with this text value and change maybe the text value on the left side of the bar. But before I do that, I'm just going to go into the bar chart and just remove the, I'm just going to remove this, remove the marks label. So now in the Gantt chart, I'm going to go into the labels, I'm going to go into the alignment, and I'm just going to put it on the left side of the Gantt chart. Now, the only thing that I need to do is, again, do dual axis, and that's it. So let me just change the color because I can't really see this. Change that. Oh. Okay. So now I have this, the value of the Gantt chart, which is now inside of the bars. Okay, so moving on. Now, by default, if you hover over any of the measures, you don't really have any tooltips, so you don't really know where this measure is coming from. Now, in this particular measure here, what we did is we can add a comment, so that whenever you hover over the measure, you actually get some comment we're telling you what this measure does. So how do we add a comment? So we can just go under the default properties and just select comments. And here we can say this is profit by order coming from Superstore. So once we now added this comment, so once we hover over this particular measure, we have now a tooltip that's giving us a little bit more information of what this measure does. So this is very useful if you're creating calculated fields and you have a lot of logic that's included in there. You can just have a tooltip so that whenever users are using this calculated field, they'll know in fact what it does. Another way of using annotations or how to use how to put a little bit more text or context on this visualization is if we use caption. So how do we use captions? If I just do a right click on the gray area, I have in the drop down menu, I have the option to use caption. So now this caption here is giving me a space where I can actually text and type and explain what this particular visualization is representing. So if we wanted to change the text, you just double click and you have now the option of adding or modifying or explaining what this visualization does. The great thing about the caption is that you can actually move it and put it wherever you think that it will look good or be whatever you think would be the best place for this caption. Okay, that's all I had prepared. Rob, back to you.
Thanks, Malenko. Yeah, let me go ahead and take control back. All right, and let me share my screen again. All right, so let's switch over to getting multiple colors in a scatter plot. So here you kind of got that quadrant approach to good, bad on two different measures. In this case, profit and sales. Pretty simple to do. Let's just build out the viz real quick. I'll take sales and profit, and let's bring our customers in. And let me just reverse that. We'll make these circles. And then all I've got is really two calculated fields. Let me go ahead and show you what the logic looks like for both of those. So I'll edit the, popped up on my other screen. Basically, we have one that says if profit is greater than 0, then we're going to say it has positive profit. Otherwise, it has negative profit, and then end. And then as you'd imagine, basically sales is the exact same thing. If sales is over, I just chose 10,000, so it's kind of in a meaty part of the mass there. Then high sales, else low sales. And all we're going to do is take those onto the color one at a time, per the trick that Malenko showed us, which is having multiple fields on color. Right now, just with the profit one, we see that everything is orange is over, has positive profit. Everything that's blue is negative profit. We'll take the sales onto the display, and then we'll set that up as color as well. And there we go. We've got our four different quadrants, if you will, and just to add that quadrant effect, all we need are reference lines. So let's bring one out for, we'll do it that way. So now we have our two reference lines. In this case, let's just do a, let's make this a constant. Actually, I forgot. Let me switch that up. Let me do the reference lines one at a time, simply because it might just be easier to set the settings on that. So we'll do reference line for sales, and we'll make that a constant of 10,000 to match our calculation. And then we've actually got the 0 line for the profit, so we don't even need it. But there you go. And then of course you can change your colors accordingly if you just wanted, green to be well, green's profit and positive profit and high profit. Let's say we wanted to do red over here and then yellow over here. Right. So you have a lot of options there, but the core principle is basically the same. So moving on to the next one, you see we've actually got something called bands. It's commonly referred to as bands when it's big numbers. You can probably guess what the A stands for. There are lots of different acronyms for it. But this is actually a lot easier to achieve than initially thought. So really a couple ways to do it. what you're able to leverage are your measure names and measure values. So let's just take our measure names, double click on that, and it's going to create an instance for each one. We don't necessarily need all of them, but that's actually the easiest way to start, and then I'll just take off what I don't really need. And let's maybe get rid of all those. I'll just drag them off. We have, in this case, 4, that's fine. And then let's simply just resize them. So we'll come in, it keeps popping up on my second screen, so sorry about that. Let's make this nice and large, maybe 26. There we go. And of course I could color them accordingly as well, so I'll take my measure names and do the control drag to color, so they each have, let's reset that. There we go. And then as far as the labels, same thing. We can just put the measure names on the labels as well. So let's put them on the text. Obviously it's a little bit larger text, so we'll go ahead and change that. And by the way, one thing you'll learn with Tableau as you start to go through some of these creative things is sometimes it might require a step back to take 2 steps forward. So it might look ugly before it looks beautiful, if you will. Let's actually take that profit duplicate off, and let's replace that with maybe just a different measure. There we go. And reassign that palette, just so we have 4 different colors. And just to make it really effective, let's make it all bold. And there's our KPI header, or bands as we like to call them. All right, so moving on to the next one, we've actually got a dual axis map, and this one actually has 2 different color legends. So let's build that out, because it's not as straightforward as you might think. So let's take our sales, and let's take our state, and let's just go into show me to build it. We have our filled map here. Now, in order to do a dual axis, it's kind of like the same for just a traditional chart. All you do is copy, hold down a control on one of the latitudes instead of your measures to drag and drop. And now we have 2 marks cards, one here, one here. And on this one, we'll simply change it from an automatic, which is defaulting to the map, to circles. And then, of course, we'll dual axis this. Now, the only challenge, obviously, is that it's kind of hard to make out those individual circles. By the way, you can rearrange these so one actually appears kind of on top of the other. But what we want to do is actually make these a different shade, so it's a lot easier to see. So the first thing we're going to do is let's actually size this by sales instead on the circles, and let's color by that same measure, which should be, let's color it by profit. Sorry about that. Do a color by profit and color by profit here on the second one. And I'm going to just start by changing this from whatever sunrise, sunset diverging that it had started with, and we'll just do maybe a blue-green. Let's apply that. And now, in order to get the different color combination on the second one, all I did is kind of trick Tableau, because I created a second field, a second calculation, which is sum of profit. So even though it's actually calculating the same thing as our sum of profit by default, now I can actually say, hey, let's use this to color it differently. So just kind of tricking Tableau that way. And let's make this a red gold. So now we have 2 different colors to indicate the profit. And let's just put a border on this so it's a little bit easier to see. And there's our dual axis map with 2 different colors. All right, moving on to the next one, we're going to build something called a slope chart. So a slope chart is really designed to showcase overall trend from a start and an end point. This is actually a lot simpler to build than you might think. Let's begin with just sales by order date. And really, since we're doing a starting and an end point, all we need are the start and the end. So we'll just keep the beginning of 2016 and the end of 2019. And let's do a color by region. And let me change this to maybe average, just for a little bit better look. Let's go ahead and change this to fit the width, so it gets a little bit wider. And just like we saw before with Malenko's lollipop chart, we're just going to create a dual axis. And then on the, I'm going to actually take his tip and keep this as a line chart so the automatic doesn't override. But on the second one, we'll change this to a circle. And then we'll dual axis as we talked about before. And usually you might want to just double check that you're synchronizing those axes. And then of course, since we don't need the second one, let's just uncheck the show header. And we'll just add the label of the average sales on that circle. Maybe make them a little bit bigger. And then of course, just change the label so it's lining up inside the circle. And maybe we'll make that white just so it's a little bit easier to see. So there's our slope chart. Moving on to the next one, this is a hex map. This is a kind of a good approach to combat the Alaska effect. If you're not familiar with that, it's basically that it's taking into account or I should say, it's ignoring the size of the state, right? So Alaska and Texas and California always appear to be the most prominent in terms of your measure if you're coloring by state, whereas Rhode Island always seems to kind of fall off the map there. And so this kind of puts them all on the same footing. So easy way to do this. There are actually data sets out there that actually have each state plotted already. And all I did was join that to our data. So if I come into my data source, you see that I've got a hex worksheet that's literally showing each individual state plus DC in a plot of columns and rows. That's it. It's 51 rows of data. I've just joined it on the state to our data source, and that means that I can come in and build this out. So let's start by going into our columns and rows, and as I pull on abbreviation into the view, you see it's kind of tilted. So let's go ahead and pivot that. And it's actually upside down, which means that the rows need to be negative, or we can reverse the axis. So I can right click on the rows, edit the axis, and then just say reverse. And now we've got kind of the rough outline. Or alternatively, I could keep the axis as is, use Malenko's calculation from before, or his tip from before, put a negative in front of that field, and it reverses it for me. Now all I've got to do is change this to a hexagon shape. This is just a hexagon image that I've downloaded from a Google search, put it into a specific folder in my and pointed into my shapes file or shapes folder of my Tableau repository. And I can just apply that and resize it, make it a little bit bigger. And now I can color by different fields. Right? So as I color by sum of sales, you'll see that each of the individual shapes is slightly different. Again, I think we're seeing a little bit of the Alaska effect because California is still so large. So let's do just an average. Maybe that changes things a little bit. And then at that point, it's simply just formatting to say, let's show the header here to unshow the header. And of course, get rid of the zero lines and the grid lines like we saw before. And let's go into our grid lines, say none, and zero lines, say none. And certainly we could take on the next step of putting the abbreviations in the label. And of course, let's go ahead and line those up inside the circles and make sure that we allow them to overlap. And of course, continue to format as needed from there. Sticking with the theme of different chart types, because again, one of the interesting things about Show Me is that it kind of keeps you inside of a box in some capacity in terms of thinking of just a few default chart types. And really, I like to refer to Show Me as just kind of the initial launch of a different chart type. It's kind of like your 26 letters of 26 letters of the English language in punctuation, right? From those 26 letters in punctuation, you can write whatever books, paragraphs, sentences that you like, and so the possibilities truly are endless. So just like you're seeing here, it's actually pretty simple to create a calendar view, but it doesn't show up and show me. So let's go ahead and build that calendar view. And I'm going to start by just pulling on different elements of my date, right? So I'm going to take on my order date, but instead of the year, I'm going to change that to weekday. So now we've got our, oh, that's interesting. Let me just build this from scratch. Let's take our, try that again. Let's take our order date, select weekday, and there we go. We've got our Sunday through Saturday. We're going to need to do the same thing with different week numbers. So we'll select week, and now we've got week 1, week 2, week 3, all the way through. And we'll want to break these down by year and month, of course. So let's just include that in the view and expand that out to quarter, but instead of quarter, let's change that to month. Now what I want to do is expand this out so it fits the width, give us a little bit more room. And let's take our our profit and put it on color. And I'll use one of the earlier tricks, which is Control and the up arrow to make that a little bit taller, if you will. And it would help to have a little bit of a border. So let's put a border around these, make them just a little bit bigger. And now, of course, we'll want the date to show up. So all I have to do is come in and say order date to label. And let's actually override this and keep it as a square. Now, of course, it's defaulting to the year of that order date field, so all we have to do is change that to the day. And let's reposition this from an alignment standpoint. So let's put it in the top right corner there. And of course, we can hide the week number, but now we've got January 3rd, 2016, and then all the way through. So really pretty simple and straightforward to do. It's just about placing the appropriate pills on the right locations and in the right order there. All right, a couple more. Ooh, this is a little bit larger than I was expecting. Let me go ahead and bump this down so it fits on one page. Go. So there are a couple things that we'll show on this. First is basically we have a there we go. We have an information button. We'll get to that momentarily, but we also have a kind of a selector control at the top, which is acting as a legend as well. So this is kind of a navigation bar that's serving as a legend. Pretty simple and straightforward to do. Let me go ahead and I'm just going to start from scratch on this one again. So let's take our region out at the top. Actually, let's put it on color. And we'll want to label it as well. And let's go ahead and put it at the top here. Let's do it one more time. And let me undo that. All right, so now what we're going to want to do is change this mark type from the automatic, which is defaulting to text, to a square. And let's go ahead and expand this out. Let's fit the entire view. Actually fit the width. And all we should have to do is bump this up. And let's put the label, again, rearrange the label in terms of alignment so it's in the middle. And let's go ahead and just expand this out. And there we go. So that was really just for proper spacing. But at this point, all we have to do is just come in and say, let's uncheck show header. And we've got the layout for it. And then all we'd have to do is come into create a dashboard and use that as an action. So let's take our trend and sheet 48, which is one that I just created. Let's drag it out there. I obviously don't need this anymore since we don't need that legend. And let's shrink it down, get rid of the title. And then all we have to do is apply it as a filter. And there we go. And now we've got kind of this color, this legend, or this navigation that's also serving as a legend for the views down below. Being a bit of a stickler here, I just want to make sure that the formatting is pretty good there. All right, a couple more, and then we'll open it up for questions. You see that on the initial dashboard, I had this information button here. A lot of different ways you could accomplish this. Certainly, you could add that image into your shape files inside your repository. If you just Googled for an information button image, I'm sure there's a JPEG out there somewhere. But someone actually showed me a trick that I thought was really, really helpful, and that's just to create an iButton sheet. So let's do that. If you just double click in here, we're going to use that as an inline calculation, and all we have to do is say I. And what we're going to do is change the mark type from automatic, which defaults to text, to a circle. Let's go ahead and make it a little bit bigger. And again, let's expand that out ever so slightly. Maybe I made it a little too big. There we go. And let's add that I into the label. It, of course, puts it off to the right-hand side. As you've seen before, we can change that, make the alignment in the middle, and then, of course, it's already in the white format, which is great, but we want to change that font, and let's make it bold, italicized. And if we really want to be official, let's just make it a font of Georgia, and then we have a great looking I button, which means that anything that we put in the tooltip will now serve as that hover. So this is a great place for instructions. We can put our index of fields, ... and you get the point, and that means that on our new dashboard, we can take iButton 2. Actually, before I do the drag and drop, I'm going to change it to floating. And I'll put it out there. Get rid of the title. And it doesn't need to be that big. And I'll just rearrange it. And now we've got our iButton right there as kind of a quick index. So no messing with files you have to download, no putting them into a repository folder. It's just that simple. And then the last tip that I have before we check out the Q&A panel is if you go back to kind of the example that we had before, where maybe we're looking at kind of a list of KPIs. Lots of different ways to accomplish this, but let me show you kind of what I'm talking about here. So you see on some of these vizzes, we've actually got kind of an upside down triangle or a right side up triangle to indicate positive or negative trends, right? You can certainly accomplish that with a shapefile or just the default shapes that are out there. But even more simple, because we're looking at profit, if I just go into the settings of profit like Malenko showed us before and go to the number format, I can put symbols right in here. So I've actually got a Word document, and all I've done is downloaded these symbols from a quick Google search. I'm going to do a copy, and I'm going to paste it inside the parentheses one right there. And by the way, if I hit OK, you'll see that it should actually update the one negative one. And of course, if I did the same thing for the positive side, go back and copy my my positive triangle and paste it right in there. We've actually got our triangles without having to change into a shape file or shape mark type or anything else. It's just that simple as going into your properties. Fun stuff, and some of these I just learned in the last few weeks. So I think that hopefully they were fun to look at, and you took some things away. As far as some resources, I think I mentioned in some of the Q&A questions that had come up. Um, all I did was I literally Googled Tableau tips and tricks. So if you can just go to youtube.com, Google Tableau speed tipping, and you'll see again. I think I've watched most of these, at least the first four, or 4 out of the top 6 or something like that. But this is where I've gotten most of these in the past, and a lot of what we covered today can be viewed here, in addition to several others. It's certainly by no means an exhaustive list, but I think it's one that's always helpful. And then as far as other helpful resources, we have the Tableau Tuesday website. So we can send that. I'm sure your account reps can make sure that you get the link to you, but we'll make sure that that happens. But this will take you to the full list of the 12 topics that we've covered this year, as well as the recordings. And this is just the YouTube channel, essentially accomplishing the same thing. And then we always encourage you to check out the latest Tableau conference website. In addition to the videos that we've covered this year, there are literally hundreds of topics that you can learn more about just by going into the Learn section and seeing the sessions. Because TC19 has just wrapped up at the end of November, we're still loading the content up we're still loading the videos up there, so they may not be available for another few weeks, but you can certainly go to tc18.com or just wait a little bit and they'll finally be loaded. But really, just to wrap up, we just want to say that, well, first off, as we finish up the series today, we'll be sending out details soon for the program and the topics in 2020. But we want to thank you for attending and participating in the Tableau Tuesday series, both today and throughout the year. We hope you've enjoyed it and found it to be insightful. We hope that we've been able to teach you a few things that you may not have previously known, whether that be different ways to take advantage of the platform capabilities, or really just a new feature that was maybe recently released. But overall, we simply want to thank you for being a part of the Tableau community. And on behalf of the entire team here at Tableau, I want to wish you the best for a wonderful holiday season and for a great new year in 2020. So thank you very much. Malenko, how are we doing on the Q&A panel? Malenko, are you there? Oh, looks like Malenko might have dropped. Let me just take a look at the Q&A. Looks like there's a couple that we might not have gotten to. Oh, sorry, hang on one sec. Looks like Malenko is muted. Let me go ahead and unmute him. There we go. Malenko, you should be able to unmute now.
Yeah. Thank
There we
you.
No.
Yeah. There are a couple more questions that I think we need to answer.
Okay. How do you show some of the blank numbers on the calendar? So that's a good question. It's you'd really have to zero out the. Basically, what's happening is it's only showing a color or a value for something that it finds in the data. So if there are no sales on December 10th, then that will show as blank. So you've essentially got to zero out the nulls. In fact, on one of these, I believe it is the might have been this 50 tips in 50 minutes. They actually walk through that, so that'd be one to check out. There are a couple different ways to go about that. A calculated field would be one way, but they've got some creative ways to accomplish that. Is there a place where you can find an explanation of the syntax used in a calculated field? Yes, you can. So here, let me show that real quickly. If you go into a calculated field, this little triangle here will actually bring up the full list, and you'll see that based off of whatever um, calculation you're selecting, it'll show you an example. So you see here that for date add, it's saying, look, if you build out this calculation of month in parentheses or in single quotes, 3, which is the interval, and then the actual date field that we're going to use, that's what it's going to spit out. So that's always a good thing to keep in mind.
There's a question, how can I insert label for numeric value and have one outside the chart showing the percent of total? You can, for the percent of total, you can just create a calculation and then drop it on the marks card that represents the bar, and the one that represents the Gantt chart, you can use the numeric value.
There was a question. Yeah, there was a question for about I'm pasting the link for the Tableau Tuesday sessions here. Whoops. See, copy that, and this will be the link that you'd want to access for the Tableau Tuesday sessions. So we got that one answered. Got that one answered. What is the formula to format the profit with triangle? Oh, so I can show that again. Basically, all I did was go into the I went into the properties of profit and into the default properties and did number format, and then I pasted the symbols that I've downloaded from the internet, just right there and right there. See here. Look, and last question before we wrap, because I know we're right at about time, but looks like we've played around with the floating charts before and are having difficulty when the dashboard is viewed on different display types. Yeah, it's simply because the floating by nature, it's just going to stay in that relative position. So that might be something we'd want to talk about offline just to figure out what the best approach is, or if you have, you can certainly do multiple different layouts through the device designer. So we can certainly follow up with the account team to provide more information on that. All right, and with that, again, just want to thank everyone for taking the time for the questions. We hope you found this helpful, and we will see you in 2020. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.